Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of What Do They Know podcast. In today's episode, the guys will get us ready for the season by breaking down the AFC and NFC West. They will go over each team and where they think the teams will rank at the end of the season, and they will also highlight the players from each division to have on your radar for your fantasy football drafts coming up soon. They're also going to share their thoughts on the first episode of HBO's Hard Knocks and answer some of the questions that you guys sent in this week on social media. But hey, what do they know?
What do they know? Well, we're about to find out. What's up, everybody? My name's Nick Hoskins, and I'm with my best bud, Jeff Garcia. And this is a new podcast, What Do They Know? We appreciate you guys joining. We're really excited. Anybody who knows Jeff and I knows that this is something that we've wanted to do for a while.
High school.
High school. We talked about doing this. Yeah. We talk sports all day, every day. So we're going to dive in today. I wanted to kind of tell you a little bit more about us. Obviously, we did our bios, but want to answer some fan questions that kind of helps us with telling you about us. One of the questions that came in this week was, how do we become Jets and Saints fans? So I'll let Jeff tell his story first because it cracks me up. It also infuriates me you'll understand when you hear it. So Jeff, go ahead.
All right. So my fanage of the Saints starts back in high school. It was actually this guy who invited me over to their fantasy league. And at that time, I didn't know much about football at all. It was the last of the four major sports that I got into. Obviously, we had the Diamondbacks over there winning the World Series in 2001. So we had baseball, basketball, Suns. You had the Steve Nash era back in the mid-2000s. And then you had hockey. Coyotes never went far, but at least they made the playoffs. They had some hype behind them. Cardinals, nothing. They were dry as the desert out there.
Shout out Phoenix.
120. Woo! But, they made their Super Bowl run back in 2008, I believe. And that's what legitimately the first amount of hype that they had. So that's when I started getting into football. And so that whole fantasy football, when you invited me into it, came at a perfect time for me.
Yeah. So I'll never forget. So me and Jeff were just, we just started hanging out. We're sophomores in high school. We're buddies. We're talking about football. And at the time, I didn't even know who his team was. So I go, hey, who's your favorite football team? And I'll never forget. He goes, actually, I don't have one. He goes, I love football, but I don't have a favorite football team. I was like, what? How does that even work?
Yep.
And then, like he said, he joined our fantasy league, and I'll never forget it. So it's week one. We're both excited. We're sitting at Native New Yorker.
Hold on.
All right, go ahead.
Check out. It was an auto draft.
And
I got Drew Brees as my quarterback.
Yep.
So it was pure fate that this happened. So we were a Native New Yorker, which is
shout out Native.
Shout out Native.
Best wings in Phoenix.
That's right.
At me.
Yeah. But week one, we're sitting there enjoying our meals and whatnot. But
waiting for the games to start.
Yep. Saints versus Detroit. I remember this game vividly. Drew Brees goes out and throws out like 5 touchdown passes. And I'm like, you know what? Sold.
Yep.
Sold.
He literally looks at me as we're walking out. He goes, I think I'm going to be a Saints fan.
Oh, yeah.
And as he already said, that was the year that they ended up winning the Super Bowl. So that infuriates me because who just decides to be a fan of a team and then they win the Super Bowl? Meanwhile, hello, as you can see, I'm wearing my Jets jersey and I'm a suffering fan. For me, my story is much not nearly as eventful. I'm a Jet fan because of my dad. Shout out, Dad. And he's a Jet fan because he got Jets pajamas when he was like 6 or 7 years old for his birthday. For Christmas. And so he passed that down to me, and I've been a Jet fan ever since.
He cursed you.
And yeah, he did. And that's not going anywhere. So I appreciate you guys sending in that question. I thought that was kind of a perfect intro to our show and a little bit about us. Another question that we got this week was the Jets Super Bowl odds, which is a great question. Obviously, me being a diehard Jets fan, but we'll get into that in a few weeks. Like I said, we're breaking down each division. We're going to start with the AFC West and NFC West this week, so we'll get into that a little bit later. I think the fourth week we'll do the East, the AFC and NFC. So we'll tackle that then. But the question about the Jets does lead us into our first topic and conversation, which I thought it would be fun. Obviously, as a football show and as me being a Jets fan selfishly, it would be a lot of fun to break down Hard Knocks, HBO's Hard Knocks training camp of the New York Jets. It's all behind the scenes stuff, really good insight into the players, the coaches.
The Aaron Rodgers show.
So I have some pretty strong feelings about the first episode. I'll let you kind of go ahead and share your thoughts before I do.
Yeah, well, for me, it was all about Aaron Rodgers. I think they exclusively did Aaron Rodgers like for the first 10 to 15 minutes, and then they kind of went into Garrett Wilson and then Sauce Gardner after that, and then they reverted back to Aaron Rodgers after that. But I understand the hype that New York would be feeling with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you're coming off Zach Wilson, who, let's face it.
Yeah, you can only go up.
You can only go up. I mean, he's been looking much improved during this preseason, but at the same time, you're going to Aaron Rodgers.
Correct.
Future Hall of Famer. No question about it and stuff like that. But I understand the hype, but I got the feeling that coaches and players are more looking like fans out there than actual teammates and coaches of the guy. Just basically what Aaron Rodgers looked like at Liev Schreiber.
Oh my gosh, that was one of the funniest parts of the whole show. I felt like he was a kid meeting him. Like he was going up to people saying, "Hey, go say hi, Don't be mean, be nice to him. He's nervous."
Yep.
I thought that was hilarious. That was
what surprised me from Liev's point of view, because I thought, like, you look at him and I know him from Ray Donovan.
Yeah.
So he's like this, macho looking dude. And like he's coming out like
come
all
across that
awkward.
way as all-
He came out all awkward, like shy
Agreed.
and stuff.
Yeah.
That made me chuckle.
Yeah.
But to see Aaron Rodgers starstruck, it kind of did represent how I guess the rest of his team felt with him.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. And look, I'm as excited as any Jet fan that he's here. Obviously, I bought my jersey this year. For those of you watching the show and instead of listening, you can see it on me right now. I'm pumped. I can't wait. This is the most excited for football season that I've been probably ever in my 30 years of living. Right. But having said that, there was a scene in particular that actually we shared on our Instagram and Facebook page. So go check it out if you haven't seen the show or don't know what I'm referring to. But it was in the film room, and it was the defensive coordinator breaking down joint practices, right? Offense versus defense. And he made a ridiculous throw, right? He was running to the right. He turned to his left, threw across his body, and hit a back shoulder throw to the tight end, Jeremy Ruckert, in the end zone. Oh, yeah. Phenomenal throw, right? But one of the things that the defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, said, and I'm not exaggerating, my stomach dropped when he said this, and it might be a little extreme, but again, I'm a suffering Jets fan, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said something to the effect of, guys, we're going to be in every game, even if we stumble all over ourselves and give up some points, we're going to be in every game, which that might be true, but here's my thought. One of the things that made their defense, I would say, elite last year, they were probably, arguably a top 5 defense. I think statistically they were also. Mm-hmm. They couldn't give up points. If they gave up more than 13, 14 points, they were going to lose, right? So they had to play with that sense of urgency. And I really hope that they keep that. And what I don't want to see, and kind of what I felt like he was inferring in that clip, even unintentionally, was that you can kind of take your foot off the gas. You don't have to be perfect,
right? Because
the offense can save you now.
Yeah,
which I understand, but come on, keep the pressure on. Keep that mentality that you have to be great.
Yeah, I definitely think his message was more trying to I guess, show the greatness of Aaron Rodgers. This is the only quarterback in the world who can make this throw. But at the same time, I think the way he worded it was definitely, you'd probably take it back. And obviously last year, the defense didn't have much room for error, with offense being probably a bottom 10 defense in the league and whatnot. Yeah. But with Aaron Rodgers there, I understand you're trying to hype him up. You're trying to tell him you did well, but there's only so much you can do with Aaron Rodgers. But at the same time,
they got to keep that sense of urgency.
The point of the defense is to allow no points.
Correct.
That's the entire point of a defense. So to say, we're going to give
and there are going to be games where the offense picks up the defense, right? The defense picks up the offense. That's going to happen, right? But you can't rely on the offense to now think, okay, we can give up points, and we're going to be competitive.
To me, if it sets up, if the offense struggles for even a game, then all of a sudden you got finger pointing. I thought you guys were supposed to be great.
Yeah,
I thought, it'll create a messy situation if it's a prolonged losing streak somewhere in the middle of the season.
Yep, I agree. And again, that could be a very minute clip that nobody else even picked up on. But me, as a long-suffering Jets fan, I'm looking for any indication that they're going to bomb this year, so I can prepare myself.
Right.
And that was one of those moments for me. So other than that, that was my big takeaway. I will say, you know, fan show aside, I felt like HBO did a really good job of making Aaron Rodgers look really good.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like the last couple of years in the media and some of his big headlines, he's kind of been painted in a certain way, and I thought that they did him really well in that first episode to make him seem like a pretty cool and a pretty good guy. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Last thoughts about the Jets in general. I'm wondering how their offensive line is going to hold up for Aaron Rodgers. Last year, if you watched a lot of their games, Zach Wilson was just
running
pummeled.
for his life.
He was pummeled all game. So if Aaron Rodgers, he's what, 38 now?
Yeah, he's going to be 40. I think I heard in the middle
40.
of the season. Yeah,
I'm a couple of years behind, but at the same time, he's not mobile.
No,
he's not going anywhere.
No.
So we'll see if the offensive line can hold up, and maybe they'll delve more into that in coming episodes.
Yep. So each week we'll break down the next week's episode. So we'll break down episode 2 next week. And then we'll obviously dive into the Jets a little bit deeper as we do our division breakdown. So let's dive in, right? So this week we're gonna tackle the AFC and the NFC West. So we'll just go through each team, kind of what the storylines are, what we think that we need to be on the lookout for, and then kind of just go from there. So we'll start with the NFC, right? In no particular order. The NFC West. We'll just start with the Cardinals because, you know, hometown team. Shout out Phoenix.
Shout out Phoenix.
Hopefully you guys still claim us after this breakdown.
They're not going to like us.
I think it's going to be a really rough year for the Cardinals. When you think about, you know, losing DeAndre Hopkins, you have Kyler Murray coming off of an ACL. I don't know if there's even a timeline been given yet for him. I know they're preparing for Colt McCoy to be the starter for at least the first few weeks. You know, I saw something the other day that I really agree with, that with DeAndre Hopkins being gone, defenses are going to really key in on James Conner, the running back.
Yeah, they're going to stack the box,
especially with McCoy, because there's no threat of the pass game, right? There's no. I mean, you got Hollywood Brown, who can occasionally stretch the defense, but it's really going to be James Conner and what he can do. And so I think that it's going to be a long season for him. I'm really curious, just from a culture standpoint. Obviously, we all assume it's going to be a rough year, right? Like the new coach, Jonathan Gannon. What's he about? You know, is he going to be able to keep the team afloat? Is he going to be able to keep their motivation, keep them playing hard throughout the season? He's a first year coach. He's never been a head coach, right? He's got to prove himself. So that's one thing that I'm looking for from the Cardinals,
and he's defensive minded, isn't he?
Correct.
And see, the number one thing that comes to mind when it comes to a defensive minded coach with the Cardinals is Steve Wilkes.
Yeah.
And we all know how that ended up. One season, 3-13,
and gone.
Yep. So obviously you had your high flying powered offense with Cliff Kingsbury, but Cliff, you could tell last year he cracked.
Yeah,
he did not want to be there.
Well, and we could, you know, this is kind of getting off on a side tangent too, but I mean, if anybody watched Hard Knocks, the in-season show that they did with the Cardinals, where they were featured for like 6 or 7 weeks during the season, Kyler Murray just ran that team, and he said and treated Cliff Kingsbury however he wanted. Yeah. And, you know, not that it was all on Kyler. I think Cliff had some deficiencies as well, but I felt like that show really did a good job of painting a picture of the dynamic in that locker room. Like, it was Kyler Murray, and then the coach was much further below him on the totem pole, and that's never how it should be.
Spoiler alert. I know you haven't watched the Johnny Manziel Untold Story.
Yep.
But you'll see Cliff Kingsbury in there, and he had the same exact dynamic with Johnny Manziel.
I just think that he's not
same exact. Yeah. He's not necessarily a leader. Like, he'll be a great offensive coordinator wherever. I think he got hired by some other team this year.
USC. Yeah.
So
he's going to be coaching Caleb Williams, a quarterback from USC this year,
which could be a future Arizona Cardinals pick.
Another one
if they go number one. So that'd be an interesting dynamic.
Yep.
But for now, they got a defensive minded coach. We'll see how that defense changes their mythology and methodology, I should say. And then offense, obviously, they're going to force Colt McCoy to be a quarterback. He's going to have to throw the ball.
Yep.
And
he's going to have to make some plays.
He's
going to have to make some plays. Hopefully he doesn't try and do too much.
I mean, you would hope that he's been in the league long enough to know what he can force and what he can't. But that team's going to be a team that's going to be trying to fight its way back every single game during the season, I believe.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I think it's going to be a long season for the Cardinals. Sorry, all of you from Phoenix that are following us.
Forgive us.
Yeah. I hope I'm wrong. Right. I love the Cardinals. I mean, I root for them when they're not playing the Jets. Obviously, I hope they have a good year every year, but I just don't. I just don't see it happening.
No, not this year.
I just don't see it in the cards. So hopefully we're wrong. So moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, I think that they are a really interesting story this year, just because. Now I want to say they have some expectations. Right? Oh, yeah. Last year they kind of came out of nowhere. Everybody really didn't know what they were doing. They traded Russell Wilson. Now they're starting Geno Smith. Well, now they look like geniuses, right? Because of the way that Russ played last year and the way that Geno thrived. He just signed a huge deal.
Right.
So they really have some expectations now coming into this season. It's not where they can just show up and win a few games and everybody's like, wow, they're making some progress. Now they made the playoffs last year. Now what's next? Right. And so they did, and I'm going to butcher this name. I'm going to say it right now. Their big first round draft pick from Ohio State. He's a receiver from, like I said, receiver from Ohio State, Jackson Smith Injaba. I can't say it. I'm just going to be out, a 20th overall pick. But he was a stud at Ohio State. So that's going to provide DK Metcalf with some relief, Tyler Lockett with some relief. If they can keep Kenneth Walker healthy this year. I think they have a chance to be really good, but I think they're interesting. What are your thoughts?
I'm hoping Geno Smith doesn't have to be the same Geno Smith as last year. They suffered a bunch of injuries at the running back position last year, so it kind of forced him to kind of play a little bit more than what we've seen in past years of what he's capable of. Credit to him, he thrived in that role anyway. But this year, defenses will probably see that Geno Smith is a little bit different, and they'll probably counteract that. They'll see what he likes to do, and they'll probably adjust to it. For me, I think as long as they switch back more to a running game with Kenneth Walker, I see them finishing high up there in the NFC West.
They re-signed Bobby Wagner.
So that defense,
he's the leader of that defense. He's the heart and soul of that defense. He spent, a year in LA with the Rams.
Yep.
And came back with Seattle. Obviously, he's getting up there in age. As far as football goes,
that veteran presence.
Correct. And I think that's something that you can't measure as a guy who already was the heart and soul of your defense.
Right. Getting
now
back.
Coming back.
Yep.
I think that's going to really go a long way for them. Again, they're one of my teams, just not even in the NFC West, just in the NFL as a whole that I'm really excited for this year. I think Kenneth Walker has an opportunity to be a stud if he can stay healthy.
I think they have a very high floor, even.
Correct.
Especially in that division.
They got to make the playoffs again, right?
Yep, absolutely. You face Arizona twice.
And the Rams. The Rams. I mean, we'll get into them next, but they're not going to be anything. I mean, at least on paper.
They still got Matthew Stafford and whatnot, but you face them twice, maybe get a split there, and then you get the Niners. Niners are an interesting team, obviously, and we'll get into them, but they have a quarterback situation, and we'll dwell into them when we get there. But Seattle has an open shot to be a really, really good team.
Yep, I agree.
With a really great record and probably maybe even one of the top seeds in the NFC going into the playoffs.
Yeah, the NFC is not loaded with teams, right? They're not like the AFC where you could list 10 teams that could realistically make the playoffs and make a deep run.
Right.
The NFC, off the top of my head, I think the two teams that everybody talks about are Philadelphia and San Francisco.
Yep.
And after that, it's a free-for-all, right? So I think Seattle has an opportunity to make some noise if they, obviously got to stay healthy. Injuries are always a part of the NFL.
Right.
But I think they have an opportunity to do some good things this year. So I'm excited about them.
Yep.
Next, we'll dive into the Rams, right? So similar story to the Cardinals. I think they'll be a little bit more competitive. If you remember, they were decimated with injuries last year. They lost Matthew Stafford. They lost Aaron Donald. They lost Cooper Kupp. So, I mean, they really didn't have a chance, right? I mean, we just talked about injuries being a part of the NFL, but when you lose those three guys, you really don't have a fighting chance. That's the heart and soul of your team.
Those are your stars. Those are your playmakers.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think Sean McVay is the type of coach where if you have him, you're always going to have a shot. I think he's one of the great young minds in the NFL. Their defense took a big hit, right? They traded Jalen Ramsey to the Dolphins. Thanks for that. Love that for the Jets. But I think they're, with Aaron Donald, the big question mark is who besides Aaron Donald on that defense can make some plays now? Because originally, right, you had Aaron Donald up front putting pressure on the quarterback. You had Jalen Ramsey in the back, making plays, doing what he did. And, now you don't have that. And so the big question mark, I think, obviously, I feel like, and you can, tell me your opinion as well, I think the offense is going to put up some points still. I think Stafford is still, a very competent quarterback. I mean, they just won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, right? So he's no slouch. But I think the big question mark with the Rams is, can their defense keep them in games? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, to me, Stafford, as long as you have Stafford and Kupp, you'll have a chance. How far that'll take you? Well, it took him to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, like we said. He won it, but I think they were very cap strapped after that whole thing, and so they had to decimate their team. I don't know if you can fact check that for me sometime.
It wasn't that they were. I don't think it was that they were cap strapped. I think it's because they've been the running joke. They've been the running joke in the NFL for the last 3 or 4 years because they're just trading all of their picks. Yeah. They had no picks. They traded 1 million picks for Ramsey. They traded a bunch for Stafford.
So they had to get old.
They had no choice. Right? They had no choice. I listen to ESPN radio a lot, so I'll give them credit for this stat. But I want to say they had 15 picks this year, but they were all third round or later because they had traded all their first or second round picks. So they definitely put emphasis on the draft. But
quantity over quality,
correct. But when you're drafting that late, you have to hit on some guys that weren't expected to do well, right? So I think Les Snead is a good GM. He made the trade for Ramsey and Stafford. I think he knows what he's doing. But you got to hit on some of those late round picks when you have no first or second. I don't even think they have any next year. I could be wrong, but they've been the laughing stock of the NFL from that perspective for trading all their picks. Everybody says, they're doing it their way. They're trading all their picks. Right. And so, now.
So it sounds like a youth movement is in the horizon.
I think so. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen on its own too, right? Stafford's old, again, by NFL perspective.
Right.
Aaron Donald has talked about retirement.
He was retiring if he didn't get a new deal, right?
Yep. So I think it's just going to happen organically for some of their players just choosing to hang it up, honestly. So as far as their floor or I guess more their ceiling, I would say 7-8 wins is a good season, right? I really don't think they have too many expectations. I don't think that they're going to make a whole lot of noise. We just talked about playing the Cardinals. They got to play the Niners twice. They got to play the Seahawks
Seattle
twice.
Yep.
I just think that
to me that puts them in a rough predicament. I agree. I don't know. With Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp, I think you want to avoid a rebuild, a full-on rebuild at all possible cost. But you got 15 picks. You're going to come in with that youth movement. That sounds like a rebuild to me.
Yeah.
So
I just saw this that the owner sent out a letter to all of their season ticket holders, basically asking them not to quit and not to sell their tickets, claiming that they were still going to be competitive, but they knew they had to change their style for basically the long term of the franchise. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in other words, please come to games still and spend money to make us profitable. So they know. I think they expect to not have a great season. I mean, anytime you send a letter to your season ticket holders, I think it's going to be a long year. So,
oh boy,
I think that the Rams are in the same boat as the Cardinals, maybe slightly better. But next, last but certainly not least, is the 49ers, right? And I think that we already kind of talked about them. They're the cream of the crop when it comes to the NFC. It's them and the Eagles are right up there. The biggest storyline for me with the Niners is Brock Purdy. Right. 100%. Not only is he going to be healthy week one, is he going to play, but can he replicate what he did the last 7 or 8 games of the season? Because let's face it, he's Mr. Irrelevant. He was
Yeah.
he was literally, what they term the last pick in the NFL draft. He was that.
Mm-hmm.
He came out of nowhere. Think about everything that had to happen last year. Trey Lance got injured. Jimmy Garoppolo got injured. And here comes Brock Purdy with zero expectations, and the guy plays like Tom Brady.
Oh yeah,
right. And so
slinging it.
It's to me, that storyline's over, right? He's no longer the great story. I mean, he is a good story, but it's a new season. Now you have expectations, and
The unknown.
is
Not
that
the
elbow
unknown.
going to be healthy?
Right.
Is he going to try and come back too soon? And can he keep up that style of play or that level of play for a whole season? Because it was awesome to see him do it for 7 or 8 games. But can he do? And let's be honest, he doesn't have to be otherworldly.
Oh no,
they have an amazing defense and they have weapons around him. He just, in my opinion, and I'm curious to hear what you think as well. I think he just needs to be average. I just think he needs to be a game manager.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah,
Same
I just
term.
think he needs to be, shout out Mark Sanchez.
Shout out Mark Sanchez.
I just think he needs to be a Mark
no.
Sanchez, two AFC back-to-back championships, and it wasn't because of the offense.
Oh, no.
They ran the ball. They played great defense.
Yep.
Right? That's the Jet fan in me coming out. Sorry, guys. But I just think that's what he needs to be. He needs to be consistent, keep the ball on the offensive hands, don't make mistakes, don't turn the ball over. And so he doesn't, I think from that perspective, he's set up really well because he doesn't need to be a Pro Bowler. He just needs to keep them in a good spot.
Yeah. To me, it'll always come back to his UCL. What he destroyed last year in the playoffs. But if he can at least make most of the throws he made last year, they'll be in a really good spot.
Yep.
They still have Trey Lance backing him up, former number 3 overall pick.
Yeah, and they traded a lot for him.
They traded a lot for him. I know Shanahan already said Brock Purdy is going to start game 1.
Yep.
So they'll probably give him a little bit of a leash and see how he reacts with all the throws that they ask him to pull off. But if he can even be a shell, even a little bit of a shell of himself from last, because he was phenomenal last year.
He was otherworldly last year. It came out of nowhere.
Yep. So, and that defense, we know all about Nick Bosa and the rest of those guys. So
Fred Wagner.
Yep. So there's no lack of confidence in defense. The question marks is always about the offense. They have Christian McCaffrey back there, so your running back problem is solved. Deebo Samuel is always there. But Brock Purdy, can he make the throws that he needs to make in last game-winning drives or something like that to get him a number 1 or number 2 seed in the NFC?
Yep.
If not, we'll see how long, if they make the change to Trey Lance and how far he's developed. He's had a few years now backing up. They're behind Jimmy Garoppolo and now Brock Purdy. So to me, I think they're in a good spot. They got 2 quarterbacks who they can probably rely on. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how long of a leash Brock Purdy has if he's not making the throws that he's supposed to be making.
I think that's another storyline, right? I think it's such an interesting dynamic. Like you already talked about, they have Trey Lance, who they invested heavily in, and now he lost his job for nothing other than injury.
Yep.
And now you have this new guy came in, playing like an all-star. And so I think that's to your point, how long is his leash going to be before you have Trey Lance? And I've even heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, they have Sam Darnold as well. I've even heard that on the depth chart, technically Sam Darnold is the backup right now.
Really?
Which he didn't stand a chance in New York. It is what it is. But I don't understand how he could be ahead of Trey Lance. So I think that could be a subplot to the Niners.
The only way I can think of is if they're setting up Trey Lance to be a trade target.
Correct. I've heard that as well. And I've heard a lot of, from ESPN guys, whatever, saying that they're surprised that he hasn't been traded already.
Right.
Just because of that dynamic that it's going to create. But I think we can both agree that the Niners are far and away the best team in the NFC West. And I think barring injuries,
definitely on paper,
exactly on paper, they should win that division. So we'll transition to the AFC West. We'll start with the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm super curious about the Raiders. I don't have high expectations about the Raiders, but I just think it's so interesting that they thought that Jimmy Garoppolo was a better alternative than Derek Carr. obviously they benched Carr for the last, I think it was 3 games of the season last year, and they ended up signing Garoppolo, who's had a history of season-ending injuries, multiple. And so I just think that I mean, obviously he has the relationship with McDaniels, being, previously with New England, that his offense, he must think that he can run it better. But they have the chip stacked against them. Obviously, Josh Jacobs is a holdout right now.
Yep.
He's not showing up. And I'm really curious to see what the Raiders do. My biggest, and I actually wrote this down, prepping for the show, is how long is it going to take for Davante Adams to not be happy? Right? Because we already heard these unsubstantiated rumors that he wants to go to the Jets now and all of these things. If they have a rough 3 or 4 or 5 games and he's not getting the ball, Garoppolo's playing like garbage, I think Garoppolo's a good quarterback. I'm not saying that he's going to, but I'm saying hypothetically, if he does, I think that could be a storyline where, because we all know receivers want the ball at all times, and they don't get them, they get a certain type of way. And so I just think that could be a storyline as well. But me personally, I don't have high expectations for the Raiders. I don't think that, I think that this is kind of going to be a learning year for Garoppolo, for Josh McDaniels. He's got McDaniels, to me, side note, is on the hot seat. He had a really unsuccessful first go around with the Broncos. Last year was not good. They were supposed to be great, bringing in Davante Adams. Now, he's got his quarterback, right? This is who he wants. And so I'm curious to see, what they do. What are your thoughts?
Well, to me, it's going to be, I don't even want to say the level of how far Jimmy Garoppolo can take him, because Jimmy Garoppolo's not going to take you very far. I'm sorry, but he's an average
he made it to the Super Bowl.
Average.
He's made it to a couple NFC championships, but as we just talked about, that was largely because of the talent around them.
Yep, his surrounding cast.
So yeah,
to me, you're going to have to develop players outside of Garoppolo there. You got Davante Adams, but like you said, is he going to be happy? Personally, I don't think so. I think it's going to take probably like 3 losses. If they start off 0-3 or something, I think you're going to start seeing those headlines come out of Vegas real quick.
I agree.
Really quick.
I agree.
But outside of that, you got Josh Jacobs, who's holding out, so you got another storyline that's a distraction there. They finished, second to last year? Ahead of only the Broncos, who had their own disastrous season. To me, they are going to be bottom. To be honest with you,
I agree.
Yeah. So, but.
I agree completely with all of that. Next is the Chargers, the LA Chargers. They're frustrating to me.
I want to love the Chargers.
I agree completely. That's exactly how I feel. They are such a fun team. They have the best uniforms in the NFL. I don't care what anybody says. Those powder blues are fire. They're money. I love those powder blues. So they have the best uniforms in the NFL. They have a ton of talent. Herbert is a stud. Austin Eckler, stud. Mike Williams, stud.
Keenan Allen, he's getting up there in age.
Keenan Allen,
he's still
he
good.
has the potential.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't trust their coach, Brandon Staley. I don't know what that guy does, what analytics he reads. But he makes some crazy decisions that I think at the end of the day, and I wrote this down prepping for the show, can Brandon Staley get out of his own way? And I've heard that Kellen Moore is the new offensive coordinator. Everybody thinks that he's going to be exactly what this team needs.
Mm-hmm.
I have my doubts, because it wasn't long ago where Dallas was having problems and everybody was questioning if Kellen Moore was the guy.
Right.
And now all of a sudden he's the savior in LA.
It was a question, now he's the answer.
Correct. Yeah, that's how the NFL is. They just recycle coaches. They become the issue and then they become the solution.
Right.
So
that's fun.
I am really curious to see how the Chargers do. I think that they have a ton of expectations, right? They made the playoffs last year. They had that huge lead that they blew to the Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
It's Jaguars, people, not Jaguars. just so we're clear.
When say Jaguars,
it's one of my biggest pet peeves. It's Jaguars. Sound it out.
The Jags.
The Jags. There you go.
You say Jaguars, say just say Jags.
Correct.
Yeah.
But they have all, again, talk about on paper, they're there. They have everything they need. I'm just not buying it personally. What's your opinion?
For me, I feel like they've had it on paper for a while.
They have
on paper.
They have.
I love Herbert. I love their offense. Their defense is always getting the pieces together, but somehow, for whatever reason, and even going beyond not trusting Staley, I don't trust that whole franchise, to be honest. I think that franchise is cursed. Yeah. I'm sorry, but they are cursed. They lose games on a consistent basis.
The craziest
that
ways.
They should. Yeah, that they. When I see the score in the fourth quarter, I'll be like, oh, that game's done. Chargers won. And end of the game.
Well, that comes down to coaching, right? I mean, that's at the end of the day, like.
Well, does it go through all the coaches though? I feel like it's a curse, man. Yeah. To me, there's nothing else to describe it. But that franchise is just, they have to find some sort of way to get that mentality going for that fourth quarter where we can finish the job.
They say a lot with new young teams, right? You have to learn how to win.
Yep.
And I think that's, even though Herbert's been in the league now, 3 or 4 years, they still have to do that. They still have to prove that they can win close games. And again, I'm not to sound like a broken record, but can the coach make the right decisions, get out of his own way? And time management, going for it on fourth. The way that guy goes for it on fourth down, like I love being aggressive. I'm all for it.
Right.
But there's a difference between being stupid and being aggressive.
Reckless.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think that he is reckless.
He's reckless.
So I think he needs to get out of his own way. So,
speaking of hot seats, that's definitely
for sure. But for sure. Everybody said that he was going to get fired before he even left the locker room after the Jaguars game. And I don't disagree. I mean, when what was it, 28-0 in the second half? I mean, my goodness. I mean,
how do you let that slip?
Oh my goodness.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That franchise, just cursed in general.
Yeah. So we'll see about them. They're another team, like I talked about with the Seahawks, but for a different reason. Like, I'm super curious to watch them this year.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jets played this whole division, so they're going to play the Chargers. I think that's actually a Monday Night Football game, but that's neither here nor there. So next we'll do the Broncos, and I think that they're arguably one of the biggest storylines this year. I know you have an affinity for Sean Payton.
Sean Payton.
Shout out Saints.
That's right.
I am very, very curious to see if him and Russell Wilson are going to mesh because – from everything we've heard from the, last year, Russ is a diva. Russ kind of ran that team last year. Nathaniel Hackett let him run that team last year. And he was bringing in his own personal trainers and his quarterback coaches, and they were running all through the facility doing God knows what.
Airplanes.
Correct. and it just was a disaster, right? I think he got fired after 14, 15 games, didn't even make it through the season.
Nope.
Russ looked horrible. That he made Seattle look like geniuses for trading him. And so I think, number one, there's nowhere to go but up.
Right.
I think that Sean Payton is the perfect guy to kind of change that culture. It's just a matter of how quick you can do it. I believe he's a great coach, and I believe ultimately they're going to be a good team.
Yeah, Sean Payton can't change Russell Wilson. No.
Yeah, I just don't know how long it's going to take. Obviously, you hear the headlines. He's talking smack about Nathaniel Hackett last year. I think that's him kind of laying the groundwork, kind of re-energizing Russ, letting him know at least filling his head. Exactly. Not your fault. You played a part in it, but he even used like the parent kid analogy at one point. Like, just because the kid wants to do something doesn't mean the parent should let them, or something to that effect.
Right.
So I think that there was a lot going on behind the scenes, and it obviously showed with their play. But I think that, having said all of that, I think they're going to be very good this year. I have high hopes for their offense. Their defense have always been good. The Broncos, I feel like they've had a good defense for the last 10 years, at least since Peyton's been there. They've had a phenomenal defense. And they had injuries last year. They lost Cortland Sutton was coming back from injury. They lost their running back, couple running backs. But I think that they're going to have a really good year. I'm really curious to see, kind of how they finish the season, because they're one of the teams that I think that their coach is going to make a world of difference, and they're going to have a really successful season.
I'm teetering with the Broncos because they have depth issues. And you saw yesterday, even with the preseason game with the Cardinals, their second stringers and third stringers got outplayed by the Cardinals' second stringers and third stringers. And we've already talked about how the Cardinals are going to finish.
Yeah.
So to me, I think on paper, starting lineup for the Broncos can go a long way. Can they avoid the injury bug? Can if they lose one or two to start the season, do they sell out Sean Payton? Do they like, oh, this guy already threw Nathaniel Hackett under the bus, but he comes in here and loses 2 games right off the bat or something? And
I personally think that Russ will go before he does. That's my honest opinion.
Oh.
I think that they gave him a lot of money. They traded for him. You have to remember that. They traded assets to get him. So I don't think that Sean Payton is going anywhere. I think that
they traded for Sean Payton too.
Correct. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. They traded for him. So I think that Russ will get the boot before Sean Payton does.
Even after that Walmart money.
Correct. Correct.
It's the Broncos need positive outlook on this season.
Yep.
Regardless, even if they don't make the playoffs, even if they finish like 8-9, 9-8, somewhere teetering, they need a positive step in the right direction. I think they'll be around there, but they have the potential to be up there. But there are a lot of question marks regarding their second stringers and what down the line on the depth chart that raises concerns for me.
Yep. So they're going to be a good storyline for sure. Rounding out our breakdowns, and I don't really have a whole lot to say about the Chiefs, right? They're the Chiefs. I even wrote it down like there's nothing to add. Can they keep it up? That's the only thing I wrote is, we always hear about Super Bowl hangover. I believe it's a real thing. I think that, there's something to be said about everybody wanting to come at you the next season.
Right.
And the off season, the parties that you're having, the interviews that you're doing, everything that comes with winning the Super Bowl. I think that that's factual. I think that's valid.
The thing is, Patrick Mahomes,
he's otherworldly, man. I can't even dislike him as much as I want to because of the way that he plays, the stuff that he does, the plays that he makes. Like you shouldn't be able to make, and it's every mechanic that you hear a quarterback should or shouldn't do, like he can break that and still be.
He can make any throw from any position.
Correct. Yep. And so I just think that he's like the exception to the rule.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have concerns about him. I don't have concerns about Andy Reid. I just, the team as a whole, can they keep up that level of play? Especially when we haven't really talked about this yet, but the AFC is loaded.
Oh yeah.
So will they win the division? 100% in my opinion. I think they will. It's just a matter of how far they can go in the playoffs.
My only concern will be their defense. Chris Jones is holding out for a new contract.
Yep.
That's
a great point.
So I think they have another defensive end, Charles Omenehu. He's out.
Did you just make that up?
No, 100% real. Non-fiction person. Look it up. It's in the depth chart. But no, you losing pressure. We all know you can't get pressure on the quarterback. You're gonna have a long day on the field for a defense.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see how their defense, adjusts without a lot of pressure coming from those guys anymore. But obviously with Patrick Mahomes and that offense, honestly, you can put me out there as wide receiver, and I'm pretty sure we'd still
get 1,000 yards. Yeah,
we'd have the number one offense in the NFL.
Yeah, because of you, clearly.
Obviously, I'm just catching those passes.
Yep. All right, so I think we both agree that the Chiefs are going to be the Chiefs, right? So that rounds out our division breakdowns. Now, what I want to do, Jeff, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot.
Ooh.
I thought it would be fun to rank out where each team is going to finish.
Okay.
And we're going to write them down. And then after the season, when the playoffs are done or when the playoffs have started, we can kind of go back to see how our predictions were at the beginning of the season, how bad we were, or did we actually know what we were talking about? So I'll go first just because I already wrote mine down, right? So with the AFC West, I have the Chiefs winning the division. I have the Broncos in second.
Okay.
I have the Chargers in third and the Raiders rounding out the division. And then in the NFC West, I have the 49ers, I have the Seahawks, and then the Rams and the Cardinals.
Okay.
So pretty much what we talked about, right? There's no surprises there. I kind of alluded to the fact that I was high on the Broncos, and I think they'll finish in second place in that division. What are your thoughts? I'm going to write down your teams as you go too.
Okay. Chiefs.
Okay.
You're not going to...
That's a bold pick.
Yeah, but bet on it. Yep. I'm telling you right now, bet on it.
Yep.
After them, I'm going Chargers.
Okay.
I still love Justin Herbert and what they're doing over there in the offense. So we'll see if they can get over the hump somehow with another year of Staley there. Then we'll go Broncos.
Okay.
I think they'll be 8-9, 9-8. Chargers will probably be a 10-win season, but I think Broncos will finish third, and they'll move on to next year and see if they can get some more depth there.
Yep.
Lastly, Raiders.
Yep.
I just don't know what.
There's nothing to say.
Yeah,
there.
I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
All right,
for NFC West.
I'm going to surprise you with this one. Seahawks.
All right.
Win the division.
I like it.
Seahawks.
Like it.
I love the Seahawks. I love what they're doing. Geno Smith even
put a star next to that one, just as we were. So we can go back and look at that.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
I love Geno Smith. Kenneth Walker, big fan.
Yep.
The offensive line allowed any running back there to get a lot of yards last year. So I have a lot of faith in those guys. And then second, we'll go 49ers.
Okay.
That defense is going to win you a lot of games. It doesn't even have to keep you in a lot of games.
Yeah.
It's going to win you a lot of games, that defense.
I agree.
But obviously you have that quarterback question. Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, who steps up, who's going to lead them by the end of the season. But 49ers second place there. Then thirdly, we'll do the Rams.
Yep.
I can't even put a projection on what the record is going to look like.
Yep.
I think they're just in the middle of a semi rebuild that I don't know where they're going to go with. As long as they have Cup and Donald, I don't think they want to go full scale rebuild, but we'll see where they go. Finish the end of the season, and then lastly, Cardinals.
Yep.
Sorry, they're fighting for the number 1 overall pick. Yeah. I'm sorry, but that's going to be where they are.
I agree completely.
But yep.
All right, so it's written down. It's set in stone, and we'll go back over that when the playoffs kick off in January. So, second part of what this podcast is going to be about, other than just breaking down the games every Sunday, talking football. Me and Jeff both love and are semi-addicted to fantasy football.
Oh yeah,
and so we want to obviously incorporate that into our podcast. And I know from talking to some friends, shout out Nathaniel, that he is very excited about the fantasy football aspect of this. So what we decided to do is we're going to kind of label for each, the AFC West and the NFC West, we're going to pick 3 players. One is like your must-have that you're going to plan to draft ahead of everybody, right? Mm-hmm. The next one is like stay away, somebody that you're low on that you don't think is going to have a big year, and then your sleeper. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do that for both the AFC West and the NFC West. I'll let you go first. Do you remember what you wrote down? Or do you want to see this?
Let me see.
Go ahead.
Let's see. Let's do AFC West first.
Okay.
Must have. I got Jerry Jeudy in there.
I think that's an interesting pick.
So obviously I had Broncos going third in that division.
Yep. But
9-8, I think Russell Wilson will at least get some of his old powers back that he had in Seattle. And Jerry Jeudy's number 1. Cortland Sutton's number 2 wide receiver there. I think if they have injury issues, they're going to be playing from behind quite a bit. And you got Russell Wilson who's going to have to sling it a little bit more, especially with Sean Payton, who loves to call the pass plays.
Yep.
That's something to look forward to. Jerry Jeudy is my must-have. Stay away. Kansas City running back Isaiah Pacheco. I do not trust any running back in Kansas City.
I feel like that's like 5 years ago when you would say stay away from any running back in New England. Now it's like Kansas City.
I feel like
it's always committee. It's always somebody new. I agree with that completely.
They had Clyde Edwards-Helaire there last year, and I think he was even the start 2 years ago.
Yep.
But now they got Isaiah Pacheco as a projected starter. They go by committee, and they know how to take advantage of each player's strengths. The problem is they have so many playmakers on offense, even if you haven't heard of them, that they just funnel the ball to everybody.
Yep.
So Isaiah Pacheco, I'd probably stay away from him. Sleeper, Joshua Kelly, which is the second string running back for the Chargers.
And that's where you're literally just banking on an injury, right? You never want to
injury or even a holdout by
Eckler. Yeah.
By Eckler.
Yeah.
He's the one who started that whole get together running backs about what we're getting paid and what's fair. He's the one who
and he's not the pillar of strength when it comes to playing a whole season. He has had injury issues. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very interesting sleeper pick because that's at the end of the day, like you said, it's either holdout or it's injury.
Yeah,
and if that happens,
and how much effort is Eckler even going to put in?
I know.
To be honest with you, just to avoid injury.
It's funny because I almost put him as my must-have, but I did not. All right, go ahead. What's NFC West?
NFC West. I got must-have Kenneth Walker III, running back, Seattle.
That's a great pick. I think that's a great pick.
I think they're going to pull the reins back on Geno Smith a little bit and rely a lot more on the running game.
Yep.
Kenneth Walker was having a phenomenal year last year until he got injured. But I think they're going to rely on him heavy, and I think he'll be up to the challenge on that one. Stay away, Geno Smith.
Which I think is funny because you're so high on the Seahawks, but just because you're high on a team doesn't mean you think they're going to have a fantasy standout. So I think that that's a great distinction that you did there.
Yep. To me, they're going to have a very even keel offense.
Yep.
Where
Balanced.
Yep. So Geno Smith's going to be a great quarterback, but not a great fantasy quarterback. So there are differences.
And that was like Russell Wilson at the beginning of his career, right? When Seattle was winning all those games, he was a horrible fantasy quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
And I made that mistake the hard way because I was high on Russell Wilson. I remember one year I drafted him, and he just – they won a ton of games, but he just didn't put up numbers. So I think that that's a great call.
Yep. So, yeah, fantasy players, beware. Only because a team is good doesn't mean other players are producing.
Yep.
So, and then sleeper – I got Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown of the Arizona Cardinals, which
I'm not on board with that one.
I'm not saying start him week 1. I'm not saying start him week 2. I'm saying stash him for now until Kyler Murray gets back, or see how he adjusts
All
with
right. That I could get on board with. I could get on board with stashing him.
Okay.
All right.
See how if he makes some sort of connection with Colt McCoy, even maybe you can plug him in as a flex or something.
Yep.
But the Cardinals are going to be playing from behind a lot this year, and when you play from behind a lot, you are going to throw the ball. And to me, after trading DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown is basically your number one and the only reliable target you have over there.
Yep.
I think they got Rondale Moore as their number 2.
That's who it is, Rondale Moore.
Moore. Yep. But let's be honest, are you going to rely on
one? He's not a one.
Yeah, are you going to rely on him to
he's
carry
like
your
a
offense?
Utility, like Swiss Army knife, like Deebo Samuel type guy.
He's a slot guy.
Yep.
But he's entering the season as their number 2.
Yep.
So to me, they're going to throw the ball. Someone has to get those targets and potentially catches, and that's going to be Hollywood Brown.
Okay.
So there you go.
All right. Now, for me, must have in the AFC West is Travis Kelce. I think from a fantasy football perspective, he's one of those guys that can literally win you your matchup.
Oh, yeah.
By himself.
Single-handedly.
He could have, how many 3-touchdown games did he have last year? How many games did he have where he had 10 catches? If you're in a PPR league, you got to get him. Like he's a first round. Like I would never take a tight end first round unless it's him.
Right.
But you got to take him in the first round. If you have the opportunity, I would, he's number 1 on my list.
I say it every year. Like I want Travis Kelce, but I'm never willing to sacrifice a round 1 pick.
You have to.
But you have to.
He's that guy.
Yeah, he is that
legit.
productive, especially compared to other tight ends, because it gets slim pickings after first handful of guys get taken.
It's funny. I saw Greg Olson on an interview the other day. He works for Fox Sports now, but obviously he was a really good tight end with Carolina for years, Chicago and Carolina. But he said that he thinks Travis Kelce is 1 or 2 good year. He didn't even say great. He said good years away from officially being the GOAT tight end, the greatest of all time. And I don't disagree. I think he's a stud. Stay away from me is Keenan Allen. I don't trust that guy. I know he's one that you seem to draft every single year.
He always works out for me somehow.
But he's always injured.
I know.
He always gets
whenever he
injured.
plays, that is.
If he plays, and again, especially if you're in a PPR league, if he's healthy, he is a weapon. Because he might have a game where he has 10 catches for 40 yards. But that's 10 catches. You get, obviously a PPR that you get credit for every single catch.
Right.
And so I think that, but I just, the risk is not worth the reward, in my opinion. I am much higher on Mike Williams for the Chargers. I think that he's a stud. And Herbert loves to throw the deep ball. Yeah. And that's what Mike Williams excels at. He's a tall guy. He goes up and he grabs it. And so I just think Keenan Allen, I'm staying away from him. You couldn't pay me enough to draft him, in my opinion. And so he's my stay away. My sleeper, and this was such a sleeper that Jeff has never even heard of this guy. But write him down. I'm telling you, we will play this clip at the end of the season because I promise you this guy's going to be a beast. Greg Dulcich. Okay, Greg Dulcich, the tight end from the Broncos. I want to say this is his second year in the league. He was a rookie last year. He started last year injured, and he came back the second half of the year and had immediately a really good connection with Russell Wilson. Mm-hmm. I picked up on it when he he actually played against the Jets. And so I noticed he had a couple good catches. He had a good game. He won like 6 catches for almost 100 yards, I want to say. And so I actually picked him up last year because I had some injury issues, and I stashed him away, and I played him a couple times. And he had a good couple games, good stat lines. And I think that, it's proven that a Sean Payton offense utilizes the tight end a lot, i.e. Jimmy Graham, Benjamin Watson. Like, you could just think of all of the tight ends that the Saints have had success. I think if that translates to Denver, that Greg Dulcich could have a huge year. So he's my sleeper. I'm probably going to draft him, honestly. My must-have in the NFC West is Christian McCaffrey. I get a little nervous, I'm not going to lie, saying this just because of the injury issues that he has had. But a healthy Christian McCaffrey is... Again, we talk about guys that could win you your game, your matchup that week. He's one of those guys because he could have a running touchdown, a passing touchdown. He could have 10 catches and then 100 rushing yards. I mean, you're looking at 20, 30 points right there off the top of your head.
He can even throw the ball sometimes.
Correct. He even throws the ball. He's a beast if he's healthy. Stay away. I'm staying away from James Conner from the Cardinals, the running back for the Arizona Cardinals. We already talked about that, right? They're going to be honing in on the run game with no threat to pass. At least while Kyler Murray is away.
Right.
So I think that James Conner is going to have a tough season gaining some yards. My sleeper is Brandon Ayuk from the Niners. Okay. I really like him. Obviously, shout out Arizona State.
Oh, yeah.
Forkham. Obviously I went to Arizona State, big Sun Devil fan. I watched Brandon Ayuk a lot in college, and he had an off year last year. He didn't really produce the way that people were thinking, but I've read numerous tweets from analysts and things that he has had a solid offseason and a solid camp. And so I have high hopes for him. I think that if Debo has any sort of injury issues, that Brandon Ayuk could have a really good year. My only reason that I didn't put him as a must-have is because of the quarterback situation that we kind of talked about. What's that going to look like? So those are our picks for the AFC and the NFC West, right? The must-haves, the stay away from, God no, don't draft them, and the sleepers, right? So that's our fantasy aspect. We're going to be doing that every week leading up to the season, and then obviously in season we'll talk about our teams, our lineups, our matchups, what we're looking like. So that's that. I want to end the show with just something fun that I actually saw on Twitter the other day, and I want to make sure I give credit. It's a fun little debate. So My Sports Update posted this on Twitter, and his name is Ari Marov. I hope I don't butcher that name. But basically, it was comparing the 4 intros for the major sports network, for the major NFL networks, right? So CBS, Fox, Sunday Night Football, and Monday Night Football. So I'm going to try and play this. Hopefully you guys can hear it okay. So this is CBS. All right, now we have Fox. This just gets me so hyped. So hyped. I cannot wait for football season. Sunday Night Football. And last but not least is Monday Night Football.
Classic.
All right. So that's the 4. So, Jeff, I'll let you go first. What's your favorite?
Well, to me, it's a neck-and-neck race with Fox and Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football is always, it's that classic. You've been hearing it since you were a kid.
Yep.
I don't think they've changed it.
No, I don't think they have either.
For a very long time, if ever. And then you got Sunday Night Football. Honestly, it's like it's time to bed. It's time for bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm not about the Sunday Night Football one. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry,
absolutely.
NBC.
Yep. And then obviously being a Saints fan, most of their games are broadcasted through Fox.
Yeah.
So that's just my go-to. It's game time when I hear the Fox one.
I think it's funny that you say that because I think that subconsciously you like the network that your team plays the most games on. Like, I don't like Fox. I think that people recognize the Fox intro as like most notorious with football.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously a Jets fan, AFC. I love the CBS intro, but I will say, listening to that just now, like prior to listening to that, my mind was made up. It was CBS. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when I listen to all four, it's hands down Monday Night Football. Like, that's the best intro as far as I'm concerned. So I thought that was a fun little debate, a good way to end our first episode. I had a freaking blast.
I had a great time.
Hopefully you
episode
did too.
1. Oh, let's
Episode
go.
1 is in the books.
Let's go.
More to come. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, found this entertaining, insightful. More to come. Stay tuned for more episodes, and we'll talk to you next week. Talk to you later.
Peace.
Thanks for listening to What Did They Know podcast. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media outlets to see future episode details. And don't forget to send in any questions or topics that you want to see the guys discuss in their weekly episodes to come.